a shaken Congress. As the House gavels back in, President Trump calls for unity after a late-night visit to the hospital bed of a Louisiana Republican.
And I reassured them that the entire country is pulling for them, praying for them.
What we're learning about the shooting investigation. Supreme Court swearing in. President Trump attends to install his nominee, Justice Neil Gorsuch. Pope Francis cracking down, how he's keeping tabs on his cardinals. And Europe and Asia divided by a marvel of nature. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, June 15th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. GOP Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana is still in critical condition tonight as the House of Representatives gavels in. A gunman shot Scalise and 4 others as they practiced for a charity baseball game. Tonight, that game will go on. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports from the Nationals Park in D.C.
Good evening, Lauren. The lawmakers we've been speaking with say that the game between Democrats and Republicans must go on. They say it's a sign that hate and violence will not win. President Trump says Representative Scalise's condition is much more difficult than originally thought. After a late-night visit to Representative Steve Scalise, today, President Trump offers his assessment.
He's in some trouble, but he's a great fighter, and he's going to be okay, we hope.
Scalise's Catholic parish in Metairie, Louisiana, is hoping and praying for his recovery. The FBI says suspected shooter 66-year-old James Hodgkinson of Belleville, Illinois, was living in his van near D.C. since March. He was frequently seen in a YMCA near the site of the shooting and also visited a local restaurant.
He didn't strike me as a particularly nice fellow or very good to talk to, so I kept my distance.
On Facebook, Hodgkinson lashed out against Republicans and President Trump. And Senator Bernie Sanders says the shooter was apparently a volunteer on his failed presidential campaign.
I am sickened by this despicable act.
Congressional aide Zach Barth was also shot on Wednesday. He says when it happened, his reflexes took over.
I decided if I wanted to live, I needed to get better cover, so I sprinted down. I literally ran for my life.
Barth's boss, Texas Representative Roger Williams, injured his leg jumping into a dugout to escape the spray of bullets.
And my family and I will be forever grateful. The thin blue line held today, and law enforcement officers everywhere should be proud.
Representative Williams there speaking of the 2 Capitol Hill police officers who saved the lawmakers yesterday. Crystal Grimes and David Bailey both suffered minor injuries. Now, lobbyist Matt Micah is still in critical condition. His family says they appreciate all of the love and prayers. Lauren?
Jason, tonight's game, Republicans versus Democrats, has always been for charity. But is there someone else they're helping out tonight?
They're helping out. They originally planned to help out these groups, and they still are, the Boys and Girls Club of Washington, the Nationals Dream Foundation. But they added one more just yesterday in light of everything that happened, the Fallen Officers Fund. Lauren?
Jason Calvi reporting from the Washington Nationals Park. Thank you, Jason. Philip Wegman, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner, joins us now today on the House floor. Philip, we heard from Republican Representative Glenn Thompson from Pennsylvania, and he's saying what a lot of people are saying, calling for replacing the attacks of hateful personal politics and resistance with respect. Yet you write there is really only one response to this tragedy.
Well, I think something miraculous actually happened right after the attack. It was across town at a different diamond. Democrats actually huddled in a concrete dugout, and they turned that into an impromptu sanctuary, and they prayed for Republicans.
We have that tweet. One of the representatives there tweeted that out. It was Representative Kewen, I think,
That's right.
of Nevada, and he tweeted that very very powerful moment.
Well, what does that say about where we are in our society right now, where the fact that Democrats are actually praying for Republicans is newsworthy? This is a
Yeah,
good
that's
thing.
very true.
It's a beautiful thing, but it really is telling the fact that partisanship has gotten to such a point that this is the best that we can do. I think that we all need to unite in prayer, and I think that we need to recognize that this really shouldn't be a one-day response.
Well, you know, the blame game is so popular here in Washington, and I think we're seeing some of that on Capitol Hill as well. We saw that Democrat Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic House Minority Leader, said that it's outrageous that Republicans are blaming vitriolic political rhetoric from the left on all of this. And then, you know, Republicans aren't necessarily clear either, or innocent either. So will this change?
Well, it's hard not to be cynical, because yesterday we saw them, we saw Speaker Ryan and Minority Leader Pelosi go back to back on the House floor and give their condolences to Scalise and have this moment where they called for unity. But 24 hours later, you see both Republicans and Democrats trying to score political points. So I think that we're going to have tonight's baseball game. We're going to have that moment. But Washington is not going to change because of one tragedy.
It's the same thing we see when there's a tragic shooting, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody starts calling for gun control, then somebody says no, and nothing changes. The culture of the country does not change. So in your opinion, let's talk media coverage. Is media coverage of politics to blame for any of this while we're trying to assign blame?
Well, there's more than enough blame to go around, whether you're looking at partisans or pundits. I think that the New York Times did themselves and their readers a particularly bad disservice when in their editorial today, they actually drug up a piece of fake news from 2011, and they blamed the shooting of Representative Gabby Giffords on a fundraising letter of then Alaska Governor. So the idea that they are somehow rising above the partisan fray is just not true. Everyone is looking for clicks. Everyone is trying to advance their own narrative.
And their own agenda as well.
That's absolutely right.
We're going to have to leave it there. Philip Wegman, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. Thanks so much for joining us. President Trump makes his first visit to the Supreme Court as justices are weighing what to do with his ban on travelers from 6 mostly Muslim countries. But the reason for today's visit is purely ceremonial. It's to install Justice Neil Gorsuch on the bench. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The fate of the travel ban will soon be in the hands of Neil Gorsuch and the other 8 justices. The Supreme Court is giving the Trump administration more time to file legal papers in the president's bid to reinstate the order. While it's caused a lot of controversy, Trump has won widespread praise for appointing Gorsuch to the bench. Today is the formal investiture of Associate Justice Neil Gorsuch. The ceremony happens behind closed doors, away from cameras. It typically takes place before a new justice's first day on the bench, but Gorsuch was confirmed and sworn in on a tight schedule. The court now has a slim conservative majority and could make a decision on the president's travel ban as soon as next week. Some critics say the policy's 90-day halt to visitors from Iran, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Libya is due to expire in mid-June, even though the ban itself has never taken effect. The administration argues the clock doesn't start until the policy is put in place. President Trump had no official role in today's ceremony, but presidents often make the trip to the court from the White House to honor their nominees. Justice Neil Gorsuch fills the seat held for nearly 30 years by Justice Antonin Scalia, who died in 2016.
And this is also, Mark, a big week for Justice Gorsuch in more ways than one. He was the author of a unanimous decision in favor of a company involved in a debt collection dispute.
That's right. Justice Gorsuch issued his first Supreme Court opinion on Monday. He's been applauded for staying true both to what he promised in his nomination hearing in terms of his opinion and to his reputation for good writing, a reputation he earned as an appellate judge. Lauren.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. According to the Washington Post, Special Counsel Robert Mueller appears to be widening his investigation into Russia's interference in the U.S. election. That includes whether President Trump tried to obstruct justice. The president complained about the Washington Post article today on social media. He wrote, "They made up a phony collusion with the Russians story, found zero proof. So for now, they go for obstruction of justice on the phony story." Nice. And then went on to add, "You are witnessing the single greatest witch hunt in American political history, led by some very bad and conflicted people." The U.S. finds common ground with leaders from Central America on the benefits of a stronger economy and the need to improve security. But it comes as President Trump is proposing dialing back aid to the fragile region. National security correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee joins us from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Secretary Rex Tillerson says promoting prosperity in Central America is a key component of the president's economic agenda. And today, Vice President Mike Pence says the U.S. wants to improve their economies. This is part of a wider Trump agenda that includes stronger border control and less illegal immigration.
The United States of America stands with you as you build a more secure and prosperous future for the benefit of your people and the benefit of the Western Hemisphere.
The vice president headlined a series of talks at a conference on Central America in Miami, Florida. The leaders of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras say they want to stem the flow of illegal immigrants into the U.S., but they need help to do it. Secretary Tillerson promising the U.S. has their back.
It is imperative that we work together to strengthen the formal economy and diminish the economic drivers of illegal migration and other illicit activities.
The three Central American countries, known as the Northern Triangle, have long been plagued by gang violence and corruption. The problem came to a head in 2014 when tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors fled Central America for the United States. Many of them were sent back. But right now, experts say staying at home is a risk. Jeff Thale, who works to protect human rights in Central America, says illegal drugs make the region highly dangerous. In fact, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras have some of the highest homicide rates in the world.
I think we should have, a moral and humanitarian concern, but we have a real self-interest as well, which we ought to be realistic about. And that self-interest suggests if we can help make those countries stable enough and secure enough, we won't be facing big flows of undocumented, irregular immigration.
Immigration was a major issue during President Trump's campaign. Vice President Mike Pence says economic growth is fundamentally linked to immigration. He says with a healthy economy, it gives people a reason to stay in their home country rather than feeling like they need to flee north. Lauren?
Well, we heard from the Vice President and Secretary Tillerson. Now, what are the leaders of these countries saying?
Well, Lauren, Central American leaders say essentially that they need help in order to improve their economy and to fight back against drug trafficking, as well as gang leaders, gang members who have overrun their country, essentially. The president of Honduras says that when Central America is unstable, it's a tremendous risk to the United States. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee at the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Doctors say the American student freed this week from North Korea has severe neurological damage. They can only guess what happened to him while he was in captivity. Doctors think Otto Warmbier must have suffered a heart attack to cause a lack of oxygen to his brain. He can't move or talk, but he is conscious.
I'm so proud of Otto, my son, who has been in a pariah regime for the last 18 months, brutalized and terrorized, and he's now home with his family.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson helped secure his release. Fred Warmbier says President Trump called him last night to check in on the family. An explosion at the front gate of a Chinese kindergarten kills at least 7 people. 60 others are hurt. The blast happened as parents were picking up their children at the end of the day. It is not yet clear what caused the explosion in eastern China. One newspaper said the gas cylinder at a roadside food stand blew up. The United States condemns a terrorist attack by al-Shabaab against diners at a restaurant in Somalia. At least 31 people died in the shooting. Many of the victims have been breaking their daily Ramadan fast when the attack began Wednesday night. One woman says she survived by hiding behind a table. The suspects were killed. Armed troops wearing camouflage are going door to door in the Philippines, trying to root out the ISIS-linked militants who took over the city of Marawi. The fighting is now in its 3rd week, despite government deadlines to resolve the conflict sooner. Police in London do not believe this week's high-rise apartment fire is connected to terrorism, but still haven't identified the cause.
It's still a very distressing sight, and the fire commissioner has confirmed that it will probably take a number of days, if not weeks, to go through the entire block.
At least 17 people are known to be dead. That number is expected to rise as firefighters search each room in the burned out building. British Prime Minister Theresa May has ordered a full investigation. Pope Francis is asking the cardinals who live in Rome to let him know when they leave town and where they'll be going. Some are interpreting the Pope's request as his way of keeping tabs on the cardinals. Vatican correspondent Mary Shevlin joins us from Rome. Mary, the Pope sent his request in a letter to each cardinal that lives in Rome. Tell us about that letter.
Lauren, the letter dated May 31st was sent by the Dean of the College of Cardinals, Cardinal Angelo Sodano, and it begins by stating that there has always been this tradition of cardinals who reside in Rome letting the Pope know when, where, and for how long they may be away from the Eternal City. Then the Cardinal follows up by saying Pope Francis is simply asking them, fraternally reminding them, he says, that each cardinal now has the opportunity to continue this tradition. Cardinal Sodano added at the end of the letter that he himself will also be complying with the Holy Father's request and letting him know when he'll be out of town as well.
Ask them fraternally. Interesting. Has the Vatican offered any explanation to why the Pope wants to, let's say, reinstate this tradition?
We asked the Vatican spokesman this very question yesterday during the briefing, and he told us merely that it was a, quote, long-standing tradition, and so it's always good to keep these traditions. So no official reason being given other than that the Holy Father has requested it. They're seeing it as a way of giving the Pope of a heads up, if you will, when some of his critics may be going out of the Eternal City to speak at some of these conferences and possibly critiquing the Holy Father.
It's like a CEO saying he wants to know where his vice presidents are. You know, the letter is the latest show of papal muscle, if you will, strong moves by Pope Francis that don't quite seem to jive with the emphasis that he's placed on mercy during his pontificate. Is that right? Is this going to be Francis's new style of government?
I think, Lauren, we're just seeing another side of Pope Francis that maybe we don't get to see that often. Just last week, I was reporting on the fact that he asked all the priests of a diocese in Nigeria to write him a letter of apology and pledging their total obedience to him for having denied a bishop to complete his work there. We also remember last fall the most striking display of Francis's papal power when he took over the Sovereign Knights of Malta, this lay religious order, and intervened in one of their governance issues and placed a papal envoy between the Knights of Malta and the Holy See. So yes, it is a lot of papal muscle.
Mary Shevlin, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks for the insights. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, the danger of assisted suicide. One film explores why people are losing hope. Building America's workforce. President Trump wants to create another new path to jobs. There is a growing trend of support for euthanasia in America. According to a 2016 Gallup poll, 69% of Americans believe euthanasia should be legal. Compare that to 36% in 1950. Joining us now, Kevin Dunn, an award-winning documentary filmmaker producing Euthanasia Deception, released last year, featuring stories from Belgium and Canada. And your work has also appeared on EWTN. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good to be here, Laura.
So you're doing a new one now that is focusing on how euthanasia in the U.S. is being abused. Let's take a listen, if we can, just to a little bit of it.
Where assisted suicide, euthanasia come in, that's taking away hope. They're saying give up, quit, you can't do it, you can't make it, don't hope.
Who's going to suffer the most?
We're looking at the vulnerable. And really, all of us are going to suffer in the end when it comes down to it, because as many of the disability advocates say, we're all one step away from being vulnerable, disabled, accident.
Look at the shooting that we've been covering that happened yesterday here in our nation's capital, outside our capital.
Absolutely, and it comes down to that idea of quality of life, who determines quality of life. And from my travels in Belgium and the Netherlands, we know that these countries that have lived with these laws for over 15 years, quality of life is now something that's being determined by the state, by others.
How so? Quality of life, meaning the state is deciding who should die and when?
Well, you take a case in Belgium in 2013 in the Flanders region, 1,000 people killed, euthanized without request. Most of these people, dementia, Alzheimer's, unable to make decisions on their own, and they're happy to talk about it. That's either the doctors.
Who's happy to talk about it? The people who are doing this are happy to say this is what we decided to do.
Happy, but it's out there. It's
Yeah.
like, well, these people, you know, they were close to death, and it was time for them to go. Other people putting their value of life.
Well, you're a Catholic and a very devout Catholic, and you know, we believe as Catholics that you respect life from conception to natural death. Is that in part what's driving your filmmaking?
Absolutely. I mean, I come from a family of 7 kids, and I have 6 children of my own. The idea that we are not what we can do. We are. It's about who we are. I mean, John Paul II showed us that even in his final years, as he came out, could barely speak or couldn't speak. But that spoke to the disabled people out there. It spoke to all of us to say, it's not about what we can do, it's about who we are, and that our suffering is valuable. Our place in this life is valuable.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing your next film, and we thank you for coming onto the program.
Always a pleasure.
Kevin Dunn, award-winning documentary filmmaker. President Trump is taking steps to help fill America's 6 million open jobs. Today, he signed an executive order on apprenticeship to address the nation's skills gap.
We're training people to have great jobs and high-paying jobs. And we're here today to celebrate the dignity of work. It's really a good term, dignity of work, and the greatness of the American worker, which I've been celebrating for a long time.
Governors, apprentices, CEOs gathered around the president as he signed the executive order. It lays out federal guidelines for companies looking to partner with apprenticeship programs, and it directs the government to review and streamline current workforce programs. Up next, take me out to the ball game. Congressman, batter up. And the Bosphorus River changes color. Play ball. This evening's annual Congressional charity baseball game is on. This is despite yesterday's shooting at the Republicans' baseball practice. Now, the first ever game dates back to 1909 when Representative John Tenner of Pennsylvania organized it. He was a former professional baseball player. Throughout history, the game has been interrupted only a few times by the Great Depression and the Second World War. Joining us now, Doug Eldridge, sports agent, PR relations consultant, managing partner of DLE Agency. We love to have you here talking sports.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us about this game. You've lived here your whole life, basically.
Most of it.
Most of it, yeah. And you know about this game. It's very popular among Capitol Hill types, media types, all of that.
Certainly, and it's taking on a totally different air this year. People often ask why baseball. Well, you mentioned in the intro 1909. When we look back in 1909 America, baseball was invented in 1839 by Abner Doubleday. So it was about 80 years old by the time this first game came around. Basketball was invented in 1891. So basketball wasn't even 20 years old yet. We funnily refer to baseball now as America's pastime, but back then it was America's prime time. And so it was truly the genesis of bringing these elected officials from literally and figuratively opposite sides of the aisle together to join in the most popular sport of the time.
It's really a bipartisan tradition, and it's something that everything is needed. Give us some background on how baseball can bring together a nation, or examples of that.
Well, I think baseball is one of many sports. I think historically there are demonstrable examples of literally the peace-brokering capabilities of sport. 776 BC. There was the Olympic truce.
We're going back that far,
right?
Eh?
Well, this is not a
Okay,
new
let's
theory,
hear it.
which literally guaranteed warring factions among the Greek city-states safe passage to Athens for the ancient games, right? 1914, the Christmas Day truce, where the German soldiers and the Allies literally took off their helmets, put down their bayonets, and played a game of soccer on Christmas Day. 1969, Pele going to Nigeria and uniting two warring factions Peace was brokered soon thereafter. And in this millennium, Drogba going to his native Ivory Coast, and soon thereafter, a bloody civil war coming to an end. So there's no shortage of demonstrable real-world examples of the overwhelming power of sport.
So this one is very interesting. I don't think a lot of people know that over the years, they have obviously been keeping tabs, and it's 39 games Republicans, 39 games Democrats. Who's going to win?
Tonight is the literal and figurative tiebreaker. But I think the ultimate winner is going to be the American people. And here's why I say that. When we look at politics, there is a dark cloud that hangs over it in modern culture. If we don't get something, it wasn't that we got beat or we didn't perform well enough. It was because it was political.
And because it was their fault.
But with sports, we have a positive, and this is a platform and a pedestal for these elected officials to come out and show that we're not red, we're not blue, we're red, white, and blue. And we're competing on behalf of our constituents, irrespective of party, because we're all American at our core.
Doug Eldridge, thank you so much, Managing Partner of DLE Agency.
Thank you for having me.
Finally, Catholic bishops, we are learning, are keeping the focus on young people. The theme for next year's synod is Young People, the Faith, and Discernment of Vocation. The bishops are attempting to reach 16 to 29-year-olds where they are, online. A questionnaire to find out their concerns can be found at youth.synod2018.va. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We are going to leave you tonight with a natural phenomenon in Turkey known as phytoplankton bloom. The dark water of the Bosphorus River separating Europe and Asia has suddenly turned turquoise, thanks to an influx of microscopic organisms. And wouldn't that be fun to be doing right now? Good night, and God bless.